Each day we run a live online session that's focused on helping folks navigate the transition into retirement. So for example, anything from how to improve your memory and your sleep to how to deepen your connection with yourself and others to starting a small business in your third act to creating a joyful relationship with money. Each of our sessions is about an hour in length and broken down into 3 parts. There's a 20-minute talk by an expert, there's a 10-minute live Q&A, and then there's a 20 to 30-minute breakout room conversation.
Seniority Authority exists to answer your questions on aging. The world has changed dramatically in a generation, with more retirees than ever before, living longer with more choices. If you're an older adult or have an older adult in your life, where do you go to begin to understand those choices? I'm your host, Cathleen Toomey, with over a decade of work experience in retirement communities. I can track down the right people to answer your questions. So send your questions on aging to me, and together, let's get smarter about growing older. How many college students do you know who drop out of school? They backpack around Europe, right? How many do you know that drop out of school to go to a nursing home for a year? All because they're trying to understand how to better solve the real challenges of aging. Tune in to hear the fascinating story of my next guest who did just that and created a successful product and sold his company at age 23. Then went back to the drawing board to keep fixing problems. What's his next solution? Tune in to learn more. Thanks to our show sponsor, the Riverwoods Group, Northern New England's largest family of nonprofit retirement communities, where active adults find community, purpose, and peace of mind. Visit riverwoodsgroup.org. Now let's hear from today's guest. Welcome to Seniority Authority. I'm your host, Cathleen Toomey. Imagine you're a college sophomore, fed up with what you see as spinning your wheels, not accomplishing much, so you drop out. But instead of backpacking through Europe, you and your 2 buddies move into a nursing home. Yep, that's right. Jeremy Dabor and his friends dropped out of McGill University and lived for a year in 3 different nursing homes, just to understand what the real issues were for older adults. Then they left and did something about it. They created and launched Sensassure, a highly successful incontinence products for adults in nursing homes that help to increase adults' dignity and improved nursing efficiency. 2 years later, and Jeremy sold the company, but instead of relishing his success, he went back to the drawing board to focus on boomers. We are so excited to have you on Seniority Authority, Jeremy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get into where you are now, I'd love to go back to where your journey began. You spent your early 20s living in a nursing home. Can you tell me a little bit about what brought you there?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town, Ontario, and went to school in Montreal, Quebec at McGill University. And, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. And I spent 2 years in undergrad and decided at that point I didn't want to spend 10 more years in school. So I dropped out and decided I wanted to help older folks, but just didn't really know how. And figured the best way to kind of learn more was to chat with nursing home operators. And so got together with my friends, Samir and Tim. We rented a Dodge Caravan and we drove 6,000 kilometers through the eastern United States, knocking on the door of, every nursing home operator we could, convince to take a meeting with us. And it was actually a nursing home operator in Columbia, Maryland by the name of Lorien Health Systems that pitched us on, kind of moving into one of their communities to kind of, learn more. And we left that meeting. It was a bit of a joke. We're having drinks one night in Toronto, and we said, hey, we're in our early 20s. What if we actually did that? What if we actually went and, lived in one of these communities? And so I called Wayne back the next day and I said, hey, are you serious? About your offer? He said, let me call you back, called us back and said, yeah, come on down. And so went down, and that was the beginning of a 1-year journey.
That's incredible. Just to think of the unselfishness of doing that. What was your friend's reaction to you and your two buddies living in a nursing home?
They thought we were crazy.
So you wanted to be a doctor, and then you decided you were going to help an older generation. What inspired that original desire as a young person, where a lot of younger people are focused on, I'm going to design an app that's going to, deliver beer to my dorm room. And, they're very focused on themselves. How did you get inspired to help the older generation?
Initially, it was, demographic changes and just like a lack of innovation. And so, between 2000 and 2050, the proportion of the world's population aged 60 and over is going to double from about 11% to 22%. And, I thought that was crazy. And then when I started living in these nursing homes and having conversations with the retirement home residents and the nursing home residents, the problems just became, much closer to my heart. And at that point, I really decided that I wanted to spend, the rest of my life addressing the challenges of the older generation.
I love the fact that you, unfettered from a traditional expectation of how to deal with a problem, just went straight to the heart and talked to the residents. That's incredible. Now you have a new focus, or a slightly different focus, the boomer generation, inspired by the numbers you just told us about, and also by seeing your mom retire. What do you think are the issues or the opportunities with this generation of boomers?
Boomers don't want to retire the same way their parents did. The average retirement now lasts about 18 years, almost 20 years. And, boomers don't want to sit on a beach for 20 years. They want to stay connected and continue to feel, useful and stimulated and have meaning and purpose in their life. And so really, a new phase of life has emerged, and there are very few companies paying attention to it. And I think that's, that's pretty exciting.
I like that you go where others are not going. And you're just over a year into your brand new project, Bloom, which is an online gathering space for people 50 plus to learn, discuss, and connect. How did it begin over a year ago, and what are your goals with Bloom?
Yeah, so when I was living in nursing homes, had conversations, obviously, with, many of the nursing home residents about, like what made for a happy life and, what makes for a successful retirement. And probably had over 100 conversations and just like kept hearing the same thing over and over. The importance of purpose and the importance of community. And so that was really what inspired the founding of Bloom. And we actually started as a meetup group focused on connecting like-minded 50 plus adults, and very quickly outgrew the meetup group, launched our own website, and started running experiences at small, medium businesses during off-peak hours. When the pandemic hit, that wasn't such a great idea anymore, and so decided to pivot online. So, Bloom's mission is to change the aging narrative and redefine retirement. And the way we do that is by building a like-minded community of boomers. We call them bloomers, who won't accept the status quo.
I have to say, I love your name, to reframe boomers to bloomers, which is exactly what this generation is doing. The boomer generation has changed every social convention they've come across, from, getting married later and having children later and having more education and traveling more. And it is a totally different set of ways to look through life phases. So it's not numerical anymore. It's not based on your numerical age. It's the energy and the interest and the curiosity that you have. And it seems that Bloom is helping to tap into that curiosity that people are having. So I understand how it worked as a meetup, but as with all businesses that pivoted during the pandemic, did you feel like going online hurt the growth opportunity for Bloom, or did it accelerate?
I think it accelerated. It allows us to move, much faster, expand to smaller cities, and access, a much bigger market.
Great. Where are you now with Bloom? From what I understand, we talked initially, 3 months into your launch, you had 3,000 people in Canada, and then the pandemic hit. Where are you now in terms of members?
So we're at about 7,000 members, and we actually turned off, new member acquisition. We were sort of, getting too many people, and we wanted to slow down and make sure that the, product experience was right. And so, we're just in the process now of kind of fine tuning everything, making something that people love, and then we'll resume, more aggressive acquisition, I'd say, in the next 1 or 2 months.
I think that's smart to take a pause and to rethink the structure. And delving into your structure a little bit, it's different from the traditional Zoom 40 people on a screen, somebody talks and everybody jumps off. Tell us a little bit about how your structure is different than your typical Zoom experience.
So each day we run a live online session that's focused on helping folks navigate the transition into retirement. So for example, anything from how to improve your memory and your sleep, to how to deepen your connection with yourself and others, to starting a small business in your third act, to creating a joyful relationship with money. Each of our sessions is about an hour in length and broken down into 3 parts. There's a 20-minute talk by an expert, there's a 10-minute live Q&A, and then there's a 20 to 30-minute breakout room conversation. And these breakout room conversations are really Bloom's secret sauce. They're facilitated discussions with 5 to 6 like-minded community members. And this is really where Bloomers are able to connect, support one another, and exchange wisdom.
I love that breakout session idea because it does immediately deepen the connections and the conversations, and people aren't running away. If you're in a small room with a small Zoom room with a number of people, you can't just not say anything. And the facilitators, as I understand, your team, which you have a very small team, is also a young team. So you've got that age diversity there. How does that dynamic play out in your Zoom breakout rooms?
Yeah, we're very fortunate to be supported right now by about 50 volunteer community facilitators who we've, sort of found through our kind of interactions in these breakout rooms. And they're the person who guides the discussion. Again, there's about 5 to 6 people in each breakout room. And what we found was that if we just kind of put people in a breakout room without a facilitator, sometimes the conversation was a little awkward. People wouldn't necessarily know where to start. And so the facilitators are there to make sure everybody has a sort of comfortable, safe place to share and to, as I mentioned, exchange wisdom.
And then after these breakout sessions, do you encourage Bloomers to connect with each other offline? Do they share emails?
Yeah, so we have a community forum, and this is where we post the recordings to all of our sessions after they're complete. And it's a place where Bloomers can go to continue the conversation should they choose to after the session. So the community forum is very much organized, almost like Facebook, in that there's the ability to comment on the session, to like the session, and to just participate in dialogue around the session topic.
So far, have you noticed that one general area is more interested or gets more attendees than another general area?
Yeah, we started very broadly with entertainment, and we just found it was sort of too broad, and people would sort of come and they would try one of the sort of entertainment focused experiences once, but it wasn't really that sticky. And so then we started to shift more toward lifelong learning and sort of traditional almost like post-secondary topics, from literature to history, science to math. And what we found with that was it was great, it was kind of engaging, but people could get that kind of content elsewhere. And so where we've really landed is content relating to transitioning into retirement. And there are 5 categories in particular that we're focused on: creativity, purpose, personal finance, wellness and well-being. And so we really find that that those are the topics that resonate most with our community right now. But obviously, evolving and learning as we go.
Sure. And understanding what can you do that no one else can do. So universities, McGill, I'm sure, has a great online learning program and probably a lifelong learning program. So don't try and do what others do, but do what you do best. Within those 5 categories, are you finding more people gravitate towards purpose versus finance, well-being versus connection? What's the breakdown so far?
Definitely purpose. The thing we find with finance is that, it's something we think is important to cover, but there are a lot of resources out there already, from banks, from financial institutions, kind of personal wealth advisors. Purpose is an area where it's not as frequently talked about, and there just isn't as much out there on the internet. And so we really find that that's what resonates most with people.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I think that's one of the reasons that I started this podcast, is that there is a lot of conversation around how to save enough money for retirement and how to invest for retirement, how to build your nest egg. And so any newspaper, any magazine, any web content, it's there. But what isn't talked about is, what does that retirement life look like? And as you pointed out, if it's going to be 20 years of retirement, there's almost only so much golfing you can do, only so much tanning you can do. It's really, what do you do with this, all this time and all this opportunity? And people do have a hard time switching off from retirement to doing nothing. So I think you're hitting a core that a lot of people are interested in discussing more.
And what we found is that people oftentimes go through a honeymoon period, kind of 1 or 2 years. They retire and they do all the things that they never had time to do, while they were working full time. They go to Paris, they see the Eiffel Tower, they go down to the beaches in Rio or Brazil, and they come back. And then they're sort of trying to, replace their work identity, and a lot end up, going back into work. My parents are both teachers. My mom just went back and started to sort of be a supply teacher. We see a lot of people going and volunteering, starting small, medium businesses. There's really no shortage of opportunities over this 18-year new life phase that's emerged.
There is so much need for people who want to work. I was just about to ask you about your mom, because this was kind of inspired by your mom retiring. So she's gone back into teaching?
She does do some part-time supply teaching, and she started kind of a small little business during COVID. She was making almost like kind of necklaces that could attach to your mask, and so that you could kind of wear it around your neck. And she had a scrapbooking business called Creative Memories a little while ago. So certainly an entrepreneurial woman.
How do your parents feel about this new evolution and this Bloom enterprise that you're in?
When I dropped out of McGill initially, they were certainly a little skeptical about my choice. But I think once we sold the first company, they were a little more understanding, and certainly very supportive with Bloom. My mom is generally comes out at least a couple times a week, and my stepdad as well, and they both love it and really just enjoy the content and the kinds of people they're able to meet through some of our sessions.
That's exciting. Now, I know you've said, right now you're shutting down your new members, but do you ever have plans to bring Bloom to the United States?
Absolutely. So, most of our investors are based in San Francisco and New York. And, one of the conditions of taking their money was that was the expectation. In the US, there are 70 million, baby boomers, and it's a very, very large market. We've already started to slowly accept, members from the United States, just to sort of, test the water, if you will. But, you'll see a much harder push from us into the United States in the next 2 or 3 months.
So if our listeners who are fascinated by your story want to join Bloom, and we obviously will have all the details in the show notes, is that something that they can do when this podcast comes out?
100%. And the easiest way to do that is by visiting our website. It's www.hellobloomers.com. And as you mentioned, I guess that'll be in the show notes as well.
That's exciting. Of all the work that you've done in the past year and a half, what would your advice be to someone who is contemplating retirement, who has just started retirement or is going to be retiring at the end of the year, do you have recommendations of what you would say to an older adult, given the fact that you've kind of run the gamut? You've seen people in nursing homes and they've given you advice. And then now you're on the retirement end spectrum. If one of your best buddies was 70 and just getting out of retirement, what would you tell them to do?
I think, it's something that you need to plan for, right? And I came across this statistic a little while ago that said, most people spend longer planning for a 2-week vacation than they do for their entire retirement, despite, this retirement being 18 years. And so I would just say plan, right? And, talk to people who, have done it and who have went through that transition. And, that is very much part of what you can do at Bloom, right? Immerse yourself in a community of like-minded people.
And that will spur new ideas, new thoughts, new directions. I think that one thing that people are always drawn to is being needed. And I think once you leave your work and you leave that part of identity behind you, you want to be needed again.
100%. Meaning and purpose, I think, is important in every stage of life.
How do you downshift? You're a very high-powered, very young guy who's had one successful company he's sold. He's launched another. You've done things that most people have never done in their lives, including, which I didn't mention, 2 TED Talks while you were still a teenager. How do you find a meaning and purpose outside of your work?
One of the things I think is great about being an entrepreneur is, it doesn't feel like a job, right? Like I've really never felt like I have a job. I get to sort of pick the problems, I work on, the people I work on them with. And so it doesn't really feel like work to me. This is a hobby as much as it is a job. And so the need to downshift, I guess, if you will, is a little less. But I do force myself to get out every once in a while. I recently just bought a bike. I thought it would be a good kind of, pandemic activity. I got a couple tennis rackets, and so try to get outside as much as I can, whether it's through sport or camping or hiking. In a post-pandemic world, hopefully we'll have an opportunity to spend some time with my friends again.
We are all looking forward to that. You started this journey thinking about medical school. Is that something that you think will be in your future at some point? Or are you just in love with this idea of entrepreneurship and solving problems faster than the traditional method?
Yeah, I've thought about going back to school a number of times, and I really just feel if I went back, I'd probably just go for a year and drop out again. I like having an impact, and your ability to do that as an entrepreneur is immediate, right? I can start a company and start having an impact almost immediately, and I really like that. I like that feedback loop. Entrepreneurs talk a lot about this sort of build, measure, learn loop, and it's something that I kind of see myself doing for the rest of my life.
You have done unexpected things. Do you have a mentor who you go to for advice or recommendations?
Yeah, a number of mentors. One that sticks out in particular is a fellow by the name of Stefan Ehrenbacher. He's an entrepreneur out of Hamburg in Germany, has started a number of successful businesses, and was fortunate enough to meet him a few years ago, and is now a very close friend and mentor. And I think one of the things that he's helped me most with, and I've started to really value over the last little while, is just really self-awareness, right? And getting to know yourself and how you sort of perform in different circumstances. And I feel, being self-aware helps you to be more empathetic, which obviously is great, when you're trying to understand somebody and what their problems are and then sort of empathize with them. It helps you be a better leader, and it helps you be just sort of, more balanced person in general. And so I'm very grateful for Stefan's mentorship and friendship over the past few years.
That's wonderful. And speaking of being self-aware, what do you think is the barrier that most young people have in thinking about older adults? So I work in a retirement community. We're always trying to get younger people to consider working in this field. And most of our entreaties fall on deaf ears because they're not interested. They kind of categorize older adults in oh, you're boring. It's kind of done. How would you suggest people rethink aging, or what do you think we could do to kind of turn that around? I'm talking really more globally and culturally because we need more younger people in this aging industry, because you're one of the few people that has seen the numbers. This is a growing, huge business. And yet it's hard to interest people in that. What do you think the barrier is there, and how do we overcome that?
I think there are two. I think, one is lack of awareness. And then I think the other is ageism. On the first point, just a lot of people don't understand these demographic changes and don't understand, what impact they're going to have on just sort of society at large. And, there's just this massive economic opportunity as well that, I'm not sure is frequently, talked about. And so, one is awareness, and the second is ageism. I think it's unfortunate, but, a lot of younger folks still view, when you think about the word, senior or elder, you kind of think about somebody who's like 80, 85 years old, in a wheelchair in a nursing home. And that's just not the reality. And so, I really think we need almost like a new vocabulary for what does it mean to sort of move into, people call it the third act. People call it, there's the silver tsunami. There are a number of different, names that have come up, but, they're all still kind of ageist. And so I think, developing a new vocabulary for, this new life phase really would really help.
I completely agree. And Ashton Applewhite, who you may have read her book called This Chair Rocks, a Manifesto Against Ageism, she suggests calling people olders and youngers and take away seniors, and because there's a lot of baggage attached to just the language, and that can be a barrier right there. And then lack of curiosity, that here's this fascinating, huge group of people, and it is ageist to lump them all into one category.
Yeah, definitely. There's many differences between somebody who's 55 and 75 as there is somebody who's 25 and 45. And I think a lot of people don't really understand that.
What's the biggest thing that you've learned so far from the Bloom community? Not just what you've created with the Bloom community, but what has the Bloom community taught you?
The value of community and connection. And at the end of the day, life is really about quality, authentic relationships and shared experiences with people we love.
That is great advice. Is there any last thing you'd like to share with our listeners today?
I think this has been a pretty comprehensive conversation, and really appreciate you having me out, and excited to see where Seniority Authority goes.
Thank you so much. Can you say the word out again?
Out. I lived in the UK for a year, and that never got old. So I'm kind of used to it. I do love that.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for taking the time. You're super busy. You have doing all that you are doing with just a staff of 7. And I'm personally looking forward to participating in Bloom as a lecturer, and also joining the community. And can't wait to see where you go next.
Thanks, Kathleen. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. That's our show for today. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe and rate Seniority Authority on your favorite podcast platform, and share it with your friends. That way we can all get smarter about growing older. Until next time. Thanks to our show sponsor, the Riverwoods Group, Northern New England's largest family of nonprofit retirement communities, where active adults find community, purpose, and peace of mind. Visit riverwoodsgroup.org. That's our show for today. Did it spark a question? If so, send us your questions at seniorityauthority.org and we'll track down the answer. Meanwhile, don't forget to subscribe, like us on Facebook, follow us on YouTube, and rate us on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, let's get smarter about growing older.